All right, so Storm King's Thunder is over with. The campaign ran for quite a while, and last Friday was the final game where they confronted the final boss, defeated her, and I guess saved the day. So, what does that all mean exactly? Well, what it means is when I finish a campaign, when I finish any project, I do project management in a lot of areas of my life. But when I finish a project, I like to sit down and do a basically a post-mortem. I like to look at what was good, what was bad, what worked, what didn't work, that sort of thing. So that's what I'm gonna do. And if anybody has any questions about my process, what I'm doing, what I did, that sort of thing, I'll answer them if they pop up in chat. But for the most part, I'm gonna spoil the whole campaign. I'm also gonna spoil Lost Mines of Phandelver. It's been out for 6 years, so hopefully by now you've played it. Yeah. So here we go. The campaign's gonna start with us talking about Lost Mines of Phandelver. So initially, I just was going to run Lost Mines of Phandelver, and it was going to be a one and done thing. Basically, I didn't want to commit to a longer campaign because I didn't know how Fridays would play out. Friday, I was told, was a very popular night to run a D&D game. Friday's in reality a much harder night to run an ongoing campaign for, in my opinion. People get excited about the idea that they're going to get to play D&D every Friday until they have to play D&D every Friday for a year and a half. Yeah, like a lot of things happen on Friday nights. A lot of people like to go on dates. A lot of people like to go to parties. A lot of people like to visit family. So I found Friday night to have a pretty high turnover rate. Was one of the things that I noticed compared to my other games and my other time slots. So what we did is we started with this, and it was going to be just a level 1 to 5. You do the starter set, you kind of learn D&D, all that kind of stuff. The classic start in Phandalin, deal with like Cragmaw goblins, figure out what happened to the dwarves, figure out what's going on. That's the end of it. However, I was enjoying the group, so I did put up a survey that was like, hey, campaign, we've been playing for a couple weeks now. Campaign's pretty cool, group's pretty cool. Would you be interested in continuing this into another campaign since it only runs 1 to 5? And what campaign would you want to run? And then I offered up several different campaigns, including Red-Handed Doom. And in the end, Storm King's Thunder had the most votes. So I was able to run this, but then I seeded in as much giant stuff as I could to get them ready for Storm King's Thunder, because I didn't want it to be this abrupt shift where they went from one module to another and there was nothing connecting the two together. So, what kind of stuff did I do to link them up? All right. So, first and foremost, I didn't bring up the idea of expanding the campaign until they'd already gone on a couple of adventures. So, at that point, I started to slowly trickle them in. A good example was there's a green dragon that lives in Thundertree. So on the way to the green dragon, I had there be a frost giant. Frost giants are looking for a missing ring. It's a terrible plotline, but they're looking for the Ring of Winter. And so frost giants are going all over the world trying to find this Ring of Winter. So I had that introduced. And what happened was, on the way to Thundertree, they passed by a river, and then on the banks of the river, there was a mammoth, right here. And there was a druid in the party, so the druid was able to kind of communicate with the mammoth, and found out from the mammoth that the mammoth had been there with its rider, the frost giant. They were on a great quest, and the dragon basically cheated. It tricked the giant and then killed the giant and almost killed the mammoth, but the mammoth was able to escape. Now the mammoth is lost, doesn't have its owner. It's trying to figure out what to do. It was a really nice role-playing encounter. It was a good experience. There was some funny stuff that went down. And that was the first hint that there's giants in the region. Why are frost giants this far south? What the hell's going on? It also kind of let me play up how strong the dragon was, because none of my dragons forget to eat their Wheaties, so I wanted to make sure that that was taken care of. So then they journeyed the rest of the way to Thundertree, knowing that this dragon was tricky and everything else. And they get to Thundertree. There we go. And Thundertree has a bunch of zombies there. Now, instead of having ash zombies, I went with yellow musk zombies. Basically, these flowers use their pollen to animate dead bodies into like defenders, servants, basically. So one of the interesting things about that, of course, is that the dragon, who's sort of living symbiotically with these evil plants, cause green dragon. Here he is. Let's move him to the token layer. Yeah, so this dragon that's living with them, he had the bright idea to put the giant's corpse by the flowers. So then the flowers were able to animate an undead giant. So the first giant the party faced was a flippin' giant zombie. And it was crazy. It was actually probably a scarier fight than the dragon itself, but the dragon fight was pretty tough too. So then they defeated the dragon, who did escape, only to be fought later on. But he left behind his horde, and in his horde, there was a letter from Imrith, who's the final boss of the campaign, wherein she has given this dragon his own Wand of Lightning. And the caveat here is that the Wand of Lightning is used to scry on whoever's using the wand. So Imrith wants this guy to work for her, but she also wants to keep an eye on him. She doesn't realize, that he's going to get killed, beat up and lose the wand, and then somebody else is going to get a hold of it. But it actually works out really well for her, because when the adventurers find it, they read the letter, and the letter's like, I have a big project that I'm working on. I could use smart and talented individuals like yourself. Consider this a signing bonus. Signed, I. Right? So they had this letter, signed I, that was bringing on board this dragon into some nefarious plots. Now, this happened so early in the campaign, relatively, that they completely forgot about that by the time they got going. So, that was more seeding. So we were seeding giants, we were seeding dragons, we were seeding Imrith being in there, and we gave them a very powerful item, a Wand of Lightning Bolts, and they have a Tempest Cleric. So this Tempest Cleric was basically a plasma cannon with that Wand of Lightning Bolts. He was just wrecking everything. Definitely caused some balance issues, but we already had a Moon Druid and a Bear Barbarian / fighter. So we were pretty much like way outside of normal balanced combat anyways. So it just got more bananas from there. I think a couple of times I kind of regretted the Lightning Bolt Wand, but ultimately it played such a huge part in the campaign and in showing the characters how sinister Imrith is and how clever she is, that she would have these items out in the world that would allow her to spy on people and sort of seeded these items throughout the world to keep her information network going. And that the more they joyfully used this item, the more they told the main bad guy everything that they were doing. It was a brilliant idea, and one of many amazing suggestions from Sly Flourish. So if you haven't heard of Sly Flourish, Mike Shea, he writes a bunch of D&D modules and blogs about D&D. He was pivotal in making 4E extremely exciting and fun. And then he shifted his focus to 5E and has just done incredible stuff. So if you're going to run this campaign, definitely Google Sly Flourish Storm King Thunder, because I'm going to reference that a lot in this Postmortem. So that was one of the great ideas that he had. So we seeded him that way. Then we had this player right here, Telvara, and she's an Eladrin princess, and she wanted to go for the long haul, but real life schedule changed, couldn't commit to Friday nights anymore, so we had a send-off for her that involved going to the ruins of Golden Tree, which had a portal to the Feywild, so she could return home, because her people were having to fight against the Fomorian giants who had risen up and were causing all sorts of problems. So, going over to this map, you can see that they had to fight Fomorian giant, which is no joke, right? And then a bunch of Fey creatures that were working with the Fomorians, because Fomorians are Fey giants. So that was another way that we seeded giants into Lost Mines of Phandelver. So then we had this great send-off for her, and we keep going. So what else did we do to seed Storm King Thunder in Lost Mines? There was an area here called Wyvern Tor. Normally this is a quest to go fight orcs, but when they got there to fight orcs, the orcs were all dead already, and a pair of hill giants was there. Yeah, that's right. I sent 2 hill giants against like 4th level adventurers or 5th level adventurers. It was pretty crazy. As you could see from all of the blood. Yeah, it was nuts. They did manage to win this fight, but they were like, I don't want to play Storm King's Thunder anymore, right? Because they were like, giants are too strong. What were we thinking? This is terrible. Which is exactly what you're trying to do with Storm King's Thunder. Like, you want, at those low levels, the giants to feel insurmountably strong, like impossibly tough, absolutely deadly. So that was another taste. And then why were the giants here instead of down in the Desert Valley? They are roving about looking for food. So they killed the orcs, and they were going to take all the orcs' bounty and take it home to their chieftainess, because her goal is to get as fat as possible. Honestly, I felt like she had a good plan. She was doing a really good job with it. Hashtag Team Guh. But, yeah, so that was more giants. All right, well, what about taking the entire narrative of Lost Mines of Phandelver and tying it to Storm King's Thunder? How do we do that? All right. So that's the beauty of Lost Mines of Phandelver, is the motivation of the bad guy is so freaking weak that there's absolutely, like, you could explain it any way you want why the Black Spider is doing what he's doing, which worked out really good. So here's a Black Spider. Things didn't work out so hot for him. He had this inner sanctum where he was trying to find a piece of the Vonadad. And in order to do that, he had been given this mysterious dowsing rod from his employer. And this worked out really good because he received a letter. There we go. It's in the handouts here. Let's see. Yeah. So these are all communications between the Black Spider and his minions and troops or whatever. And then here is a mysterious note from the Black Spider. And these are handouts that I made, but you know, here's him talking about what he's looking for. So what he's looking for is a piece of the Vonadad. Duke Zalto has hired him to do this. Basically, this guy's like a discount Jarlaxle. He's like a mercenary drow. He's got his own mercenary company, and he was hired by Duke Zalto to track down pieces and locations of the Vonadad, which he has done. It even goes as far as to have the different locations of some of the Vonadad pieces marked on the map. And what was cool about that is the locations that were marked on the map were all of the starting locations that were recommended by the Storm King's Thunder module. So that's how I was able to take the entire narrative of Lost Mines of Phandelver and basically use it as the introduction to Storm King's Thunder. Now, you would think that all of this would have made the Fire Giants the party's #1 priority, but the Druid was extremely smart, came up with a way to screw the Fire Giants big time, and they no longer became an active threat, because he basically pit them against a more powerful opponent. Yeah, so pretty interesting stuff. I also had a rival adventuring party go to fight the Black Spider before them because they were taking so long to go there. So I just had another party go. And then that party actually got hired by the Black Spider as security. So they sort of double crossed the town. The most memorable part about that is that this guy, Laraith, he got a bad critical fumble at the very beginning of the fight, blinded himself with an arrow shot, and wasn't really able to participate in the fight at all. He just stumbled down this river into the Underdark and was never seen again. To this day, I have no idea what happened to Laraith. It also introduced some pretty cool stuff because one of the people that ended up sticking it out for the rest of the campaign, he was a member of Laraith's adventuring party who disagreed with him when they made the decision to betray the town, and they basically slit his throat and left him for dead outside of Phandelver. The party found him, and then that sort of tied him to this anti-party, which gave him a reason to join the new party and go up against them. And then at that point, they found out about the giant threat, and it all kind of worked out real nice. So that's how I did it. I seeded a bunch of giant encounters. I seeded a bunch of giant rumors, and then I took the motivations of the Black Spider, and I said the real reason that he was in Wave Echo Cave was to find the pieces of the Vanadad, and there was a piece of the Vanadad, and it was over in this mysterious workshop where the Beholderkin was located. So yeah, I was able to turn this whole thing into a narrative based on why they would have the Vanadad. This used to be a soul forge where dwarves would like study smithing and the fine art of magical item making and all that. And the Vanadad piece was a curiosity that they were trying to figure out, blah, 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 blah. But it's the first location on this dude's list. And then, of course, he provided the party with information on where to go next. So that's what happened there. So then we jump over to Storm King's Thunder properly. Now, Storm King's Thunder, the published adventure, is supposed to start at like level 5 or 6. They have two ways to do this. Did I make that remake of the map? No, I found it online. There is an absolutely gorgeous remake of the map, and it still actually ran pretty well in Roll20, despite it being pretty big. But Lost Mines of Phandelver is so old that you could find about 20 variations of every map. Like, it's crazy. There's so many people that, rather than make a new map, they just keep remaking the Lost Mine of Phandelver maps, which, I mean, more power to you, I guess. But all my Lost Mine of Phandelver maps were gorgeous. Heroic Maps remade a bunch of the locations, or made location maps that didn't actually exist in the adventure. And then the internet community, they remade every single one, so there was gorgeous maps available for all of that. Alright, so that brings us over to Storm King's Thunder proper. Storm King's Thunder wants you to start at level 5 or 6. Here's how they recommend you do it. You start here. I think I actually could just show you the beginning of the module. That might be the best way to do it. Alright. Yeah, so Storm King's Thunder. Let's see. They talk about the ordning, they talk about giants, they explain what giants are, who the big hitters are, who the main NPCs are, what their motivations are. Sort of. The motivations are pretty weak. Who all these other big players are and organizations, and then we get into running the adventure. They give a synopsis of the adventure. Honestly, the adventure is not very complicated. I summed it up one day because I felt overwhelmed by how big this adventure was, but this adventure is not very big. This adventure is big in the way that Skyrim's very big. Like, it's a big open world. There's a lot of stuff to do. But in order to actually complete the story, there isn't a lot to do. You wander around for a bit. Someone strong tells you about the Eye of the Allfather. You go there. The Eye of the Allfather tells you that you're not worthy. Go prove that you're worthy and come back. So whatever your DM tells you to do, you go and do it and you come back. Then the Eye of the Allfather's like, I'll answer some questions. You answer some questions and they're like, yeah, the king is missing. So then you're like, how do I get the king? And then the oracle's like, you've got to get a magic conchorn from one of the giant lords, and that'll answer your questions. So then you go and you kill one of like 4 different flavors or 5 different flavors of giant. You blow the conchorn. You go to Storm Giant Land. You participate in giant-sized Macbeth, I guess? No, King Lear. And then after that, they're like, oh yeah, the king's missing. Here's a clue. And you're like, what does this clue even mean? And they're like, I don't know. It's your clue. So then you use the clue to magically figure out that somebody in Yartar knows where he is. You go to Yartar, and then the guy in Yartar just tells you, oh yeah, this is where the king is. Then you tell the Storm Giants where the king is, and the Storm Giants refuse to get him themselves. Also kind of a big plot hole. You go and you rescue the king, and then the king's like, I want to get revenge on the lady that kidnapped me, and that's the whole adventure. That's it. That's Storm King's Thunder. Like, it's super short. If you cut out all the shit, and you did like a rapid leveling system, this would be a very short campaign. In that way, you could run it like that. You could just run the core events of this campaign and just level them as needed and run all of Storm King's Thunder in a couple of weeks. Wow, okay, a couple of months. It would probably still be about 10 sessions, but the actual core of the game, there's not a lot to it, which is kind of interesting and made running the adventure very difficult. So, here we go. What they recommend is you start at level 5. And they even tell you at the very back of the book, here are some ways that you could start from a different adventure. Okay, so you could do this weird mini game where you don't actually play as your level 5 characters. You play as a bunch of like CR 1 or 2 NPCs, and you hope that you don't get killed by giants as they completely wreck your hometown. Kind of a weird flex for the first session of a campaign. Like, you tell everybody to make awesome characters, and then they don't get to play those characters for the first session. So you play as these random minigame NPCs, and you hope to God that you survive the first session. It's kind of cool because the DM gets to take their gloves off and just smash everything with giants. But it's kind of not cool because the players are like not getting to play their actual characters. The reward here is that if the NPCs survive the first session, they become quest givers. They give out very powerful quests that the players could then go on. I thought it was kind of neat. I thought it was a cool idea, I guess. But it wasn't one that I really felt like doing. Also, each of the starting locations has a different flavor of giant attacking it, which is kind of cool. And that would also influence the area that they're going to spend most of the campaign exploring, because the Sword Coast is big and travel is slow at low levels. So that's one way to do it, is just, to start them at level 5. Who cares how they got there? Just do it. You pick one of these 3 starting locations and you make it happen. Alright, so I was like, okay, well my guys are level 5, so that's cool, I guess. Also, in this section of the adventure, they talk about linked adventures, and it gives you advice on how Lost Mine could connect to this. It's not very good advice. I'll just put it out there. It basically is like, have one of these people become a Warcraft quest giver that just starts the next campaign. There's no like seed in some giants. There's no make the black spider do this instead. They're just like, turn one of these people into a quest giver. And they offer that same terrible advice for these other adventures as well. Oh, hi HQ guy. Yeah, so Out of the Abyss, I think, kind of works. It kind of sucks for those people because they're coming out of the Underdark to arrive into this nonsense, which is kind of a mess. I felt that Lost Mine was a great way to run those first 5 levels. I understand nowadays a lot of players have already played Lost Mines, so you'd be hard-pressed to find a group that hadn't played Lost Mines that it would be fresh for, but I do recommend you actually run the first 5 levels for your party. Now, let's say that you don't do any of that. You want to only use Storm King's Thunder, and you want to start at level 1. Well, have I got news for you. They include a weird like accelerated XP dungeon where you fight goblins. So basically, yeah, there's an adventure called, I think it's like Nightstone. Here it is. And this Nightstone adventure, you just fight a bunch of goblins who are mixed up with the giants, and that gives you an idea that giants are a problem. Oh, my throat's killing me. And that's that. Yeah. So you somehow magically go in the course of this adventure from level 1 to 5 so that you're ready to play the campaign. Which at that point I'd almost say just have them start at level 5 and don't bother with you know, a bunch of goblins. It's also pretty nuts because at the very end of this adventure, a dude flies down. Yeah, Grandpa Giant flies down in his magic wizard hat castle on a floaty cloud. And he says, "Yeah, giants, baby, it's gonna be bad." And that's how you start the campaign. So, with all of those options, I was very pleased with how my option went, and I was very pleased with how my intro to the campaign went. So, I used the Black Spider to seed 4 different starting locations. The 3 that were recommended by the book, and then an imaginary place outside of Neverwinter called Hog's Feet, where one of the player characters' family lived, so they had like an investment there. And then I gave them, I think, like a month of downtime between Lost Mines ending and Storm King's Thunder beginning, that they could run errands and that sort of thing. And so, with all those 4 options, they did decide to go to Hog's Feet outside of Neverwinter. So they decided they'd meet in Neverwinter and then travel to Hog's Feet. Their plan was to go to Hog's Feet and find the piece of the Vanadad before anybody working for the Fire Giants did. Now, the thing is, they went there, and of course, the Fire Giants were already there. Sorry, they weren't there, but the Fire Giants were already on their way there. So we got to use this amazing halfling village, which, I mean, how often do you get to have a halfling village? It's pretty cool. And we started the campaign off on Bananas hard mode. So they're sleeping at the halfling place. They're going to look for the Vanadad in the morning. And of course, that's when I think it was like 4 fire giants, a bunch of magmen, a bunch of orogs riding on axe beaks. Like, they all just start attacking. And it's basically like the town is under siege. Axe beaks are everywhere. Orogs are everywhere. It was crazy. So it made for a very intense start to the campaign. Like, this guy's straight up sending 4 fire giants against us. We're only like level 5 or 6 or something. That's crazy. Yeah. So I felt that was a pretty good start. That used the you know, the chaining from the Black Spider working for the Fire Giants. They followed the clue from the Black Spider. They ran to more Fire Giants. They realized, oh crap, these Fire Giants are going to be after us. They're going to be after the Vanadad. That's where things started to get a little crap because D&D 5th edition magic. So they were like, well, if we throw our piece of the Vanadad into a bag of holding, no one will be able to find it because it won't be on this plane of existence. Ta-da. Right. So now the Rod of the Vanadad can't find their piece of the Vanadad, so they feel like they're safe, and now they've got to warn people and find help and figure out what to do. And that's cool, I guess. So their first stop is they're going to go back to Phandelver. They're going to warn Phandelver about the problem. They're going to warn Neverwinter about the problem. They're basically going to travel from town to town warning people about the giants. And that's fine too. So they head out, and they start traveling the world. Well, not really the world, but the Sword Coast. And they head back to Neverwinter. They go down to Phandelver. They let people in Phandelver know. And people in Phandelver are already talking about hill giants. Hill giants are attacking all over the Sword Mountains. They've come as far as the Sword Mountains now. So the party goes into the mountains and they start fighting hill giants, and they're very successful because hill giants are pretty crappy. and they don't level well. So yeah, they're stupid, they're strong. That's about all they have going for them. So the party wipes out a bunch of hill giants, and then they're kind of leveling up off of fighting giants and all that. Even though it's a milestone, one of the milestones is fight giants. And you could tell, though, that they are very scared still, because giants are very strong and they are very weak. They try to go to the town of Tribor, and they get attacked by frost giants on the road. It was a harrowing escape from the frost giants, almost ended up with a TPK. It was crazy. They, instead of going the rest of the way to Tribor, ran back to Phandelver with their tails tucked between their legs. They had no idea what to do. They're like, we're never going to be able to do it. The giants are too strong. We're babies. We're going to cry. We're going to wet our diapers. We don't know what to do. It was terrible. And then they were like, wait, it's Dungeons and Dragons. We're just going to go and we're going to find magic items. We're going to get magic items and we're going to get strong. So they started asking around. Are there any dungeons? Are there any dragons? We want to get some Dungeons and Dragons action. We want to get items. We want to get strong. So that's when they recall that their ally, Cricket's mom from Hogsfeet, had told them that there is a man she used to adventure with, Lord Zymorvan, and he has a sword of giant slaying. So now they're like, sweet, we just have to make it to Zymorvan Hall. But there's giants everywhere. So they're like, how the hell are we going to get there? So then they remembered that if you have a ranger, your overland speed is halved. So no one's playing a ranger, so they want to hire a ranger. So that's where poor Ias comes in. Ias had terrible dice rolls from day one till the final campaign. She was a terribly unlucky NPC. But I guess they liked her because they kept bringing her back to life and they kept her around. But she was terrible. She was absolute trash. But she did allow them to travel quickly overland. They then decided not to take the roads because the roads were too dangerous. So using their ranger, they would travel at night, because most giants don't have dark vision. They would travel along the Sword Mountains, and instead of going to Tribor, they would check out Westbridge instead. This was very exciting, because this was next to Cryptgarden Forest, where a powerful NPC who hates Imrith and wants to stop what Imrith is doing lives in Cryptgarden Forest. So, basically, the huge sandbox that is this adventure says at every location that you see on this flippin' map, they have information about. Like, if you look at this table of contents, look at this craziness. Oh my god, right? So they're going to go to Westwood or Westbridge. I could click on Westbridge and it'll take me to that section of Westbridge. Now, it's not required reading, but I would recommend the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide, because it basically is the other half of this book. So Storm King's Thunder, a lot of people say that it's more like a campaign setting than it is an adventure because of all these location descriptions. Well, every single one of these location descriptions has even more information in the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide. Now, you could, of course, just use the Faerun Wikipedia, the internet, Google, whatever, to get the same information. But if you want the most up-to-date 5th edition lore, I would recommend picking up a copy, if you're going to run Storm King's Thunder, of the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide, because every location that they were going to, I cross-referenced in both books to make sure that I had a lot of exciting stuff. And what was cool is that this adventure talks about Daggerford, and the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide talks about Daggerford, and that actually gave me all kinds of great ideas for my Saltmarsh game, which was kind of cool. So they account for them going literally anywhere in the Sword Coast. Storm King's Thunder is very much a sandbox campaign. It is a road trip campaign. So they're just traveling around doing shit. On that note, if you are not good at making up side quests and dungeons, you will definitely want to pick up some extra supplements for this adventure. I recommend 100% that you pick up Kraken's Gamble. This is super duper important. This, I think, is mandatory if you want the plot line of the campaign to make sense. You do want to pick up Kraken's Gambit. It's only $2.99. It takes about 2 sessions to play, tops. And you introduce it in chapter 3 or 4, and your party gets mixed up in this this plot line, and then later on, when the princess drops the big clue on the party about who killed her mother and who stole her father, it actually makes sense because of this adventure. So this adventure right here, I would definitely include, and I would try to make sure that your players stumble across it. It was very helpful. It went a long way towards making the very poor plotline of the campaign make sense. If you need side quests, I would recommend Storm King's Borrows, also on Adventurers Guild. This one's a little price, or DM's Guild. It's a little pricey at $15, but it has a lot of giant-themed adventures, which I thought was pretty cool, and they could be seated just about anywhere. And I think I ended up using maybe three of them tops, but all 3 of them were, I thought, pretty fun side quest adventures. All right, so they get to here we go. They get to Westbridge outside of Cryptgarden Forest. Where are we at? Let me zoom out to get my bearings here. There we go. All right, so they go to Westbridge, and they go into Cryptgarden Forest. This is where they meet Claw Yilium Matar. They go on a side quest into a dungeon. They fight the green dragon from Lost Mines of Phandelver. They meet Claw Yilium Matar. She puts them to a test, which is to bring back her wayward kobolds into her service. And then in exchange for that, she tells them more about what's happening with the Ordning, with the giants, and that they need to find a giant named Harshnag who will help them on their quest. Why is Claw Yilium Matar helping the giants and the small folk when she is an evil dragon? That is because Claw Yilium Matar is the absolute coolest babe in Dragonland, right here. Claw Yilium Matar is obsessed with human beings. She wants to be a human being, but she is afraid to pay for the wish spell to do so, because she doesn't want to give up all her dragon powers. Green dragons are not natural shapeshifters like golds and some of the other and silvers, so she is stuck in her big old green dragon form. That does not stop her from being crazy powerful and crazy clever. She's faked her own death several times. She's disguised herself as other dragons and rented herself out as a dragon hero to defeat herself. Nowadays, she uses all her money to invest in thieves guilds and shipping companies to make money on her money. And basically, she loves human beings. She loves human society. She makes a lot of money off of human society. She does not want to see humans killed off by giants. She does not want to see humans enslaved by other dragons. She wants the status quo to stay what it is because the status quo has been very profitable for her. She's also obsessed with daytime television, so she has a whole collection of scrying devices that she uses to spy on beautiful women because she likes to live vicariously through those beautiful women's lives. In fact, the Lady of Silvery Moon is aware that Claw Yilium Matar spies on her, so they actually film like fake scenes for Claw Yilium Matar to give her false information about what's going on in Silvery Moon. So when they detect that they're being scryed on, they all switch dialogue to like scripted fake stuff, so that Claw Yilium Matar is entertained but also given the wrong information. It's amazing. So yeah, she wants to stop the Ordning, but she doesn't want to directly go up against Imrith because Imrith is very strong, and she doesn't also want to be called a traitor by the other dragons. So she brings the party on board a little bit and gives them just enough to put them in the right direction. In the end, pivotal role in the campaign, very cool NPC, a lot of cool encounters around her. Then the party begins their long, long, long journey to try to get this goddamn giant slaying sword. So they travel from Westbridge, they travel through the Desserin hills to Yartar. So now they're in Yartar. Yartar is like Venice if it was run by a thieves guild that was run by women. They get a little mixed up in the politics there, but not too much. And then they find out that the Moonblade, that is the character motivation of the party's rogue, is being held in Silvery Moon. He doesn't want to wait a week to get there. He wants to get there right now. They pay for a teleport spell, and they end up in Silvery Moon. So now that they're in Silvery Moon, they go and they find out about the Moonblade. And the guy that has the Moonblade basically is a rival of that PC's family and says, I'll give you the Moonblade in exchange for this artifact that is in a dungeon in the Nether Mountains. Now, this worked out well because the party wanted to do another dungeon because they were still convinced that they did not have enough magical items and enough power. So, that's where this Storm King's Borrows supplement came in handy because I was able to just seed a dungeon right there in the Nether Mountains, and they went from Silver Moon to that. So, they leave Silver Moon, they go to the Nether Mountains, they get involved in this whole extended dungeon of terror and death and all that jazz. They get mixed up in this retelling of Gilgamesh with Sword Coast characters, and the Raven Queen is thrown in there for good measure. I don't know, it was pretty weird. But they get to the end of it, they bullshit the final boss and don't fight him. They get a hold of the item that they need, and they head back to Silvery Moon. On their way back to Silvery Moon, they finally encounter Harshnag. Why do they finally encounter Harshnag? Was there some table in the adventure that I rolled on to see if they ran into Harshnag? No. They ran into Harshnag because I was pretty sure that they were just going to do dungeons every Friday night for the rest of their lives. Which, in a Milestone game, they would never actually level. They would just keep doing dungeons forever, hoping to get better loot and money, but never actually leveling because they're not meeting any of the milestones. So Harshnag was 100% a DM NPC. He's a DM NPC provided by the adventurer. The goal, of course, with the DM NPC is to make them lovable, which I tried my best to do, and also make it so that they motivate the players to move their asses and get stuff done. So, it kind of worked. Leaving Silvery Moon, they know that they had to go all the way to the Eye of the Allfather, which is all the way over here. So that's pretty far. It's like 600 miles or something. They can't fly yet. They can't teleport. They don't have flying mounts. They don't have an airship. They don't have anything like that. It's a long slog to get there. Hey, what's up? So they leave Silvery Moon, and they start heading to Zymorvan Hall, and they get to Zymorvan Hall. So thank God for that. So they get to Zymorvan Hall, and they're like, we finally made it to Zymorvan Hall. We can get the giant slaying sword. Well, according to the adventure, Lord Zymorvan doesn't have the sword anymore. Classic. His son stole it, and where did his son abscond with the sword to? Freaking Yartar. So now the party is like, Jesus Christ. And they don't want to go all the way back around the Evermoors. They certainly don't want to go through the Evermoors. So they're like, I guess we'll just get the giant slaying sword later. Which is, you know, sad trumpet sound. That's the way the adventure panned out. But part of why the sword is in Yartar is because they want you to go to Yartar in this campaign. They want you to go to Yartar in this campaign early, and they want you to, so when you have to come back here later, you know right away that you're supposed to go to Yartar. This was very important because I needed to run Kraken's Gambit so that the entire campaign would make sense, and them having to go to Yartar for the sword allowed me to transition them into the adventure Kraken's Gambit. So I would recommend, if you run this, you make sure that the giant slaying sword, sell the hell out of that sword. Tell them how great that sword is. you want them to want that sword, and you want them to end up in Yartar, so you can run the $2.99 Kraken's Gambit and save the plotline of this campaign. That's what you have to do. So they decide, all right, we'll get it later. Let's go to the Eye of the Allfather. They leave Zymorvan Hall, and then I stupidly rolled for a random encounter. And they got a random encounter, and the random encounter was, there is a sign on the road that says, this road belongs to orcs, and it had a bunch of humanoids, like human beings, heads staked up on stakes near the sign. The party's like, we don't take no shit from no orcs. So they were like, we're going to go and stop these orcs. And I'm like, all right, you follow the trail, it leads to the Ravine River. You sure you want to cross the Ravine River into the Evermoors to track down these orcs? Yes. Okay, the Evermoors are full of black dragons and orcs and trolls. Are you sure you want to cross into the Evermoors? Yes. So, the first of many ridiculous uses of shape water takes place, and they, Moses style, split the river and travel over to the Evermoors. Now they're in the Evermoors, they start tracking down the orcs, they find the orcs in a orc stronghold. There are, by my own description, 50 orcs in the stronghold. I'm like, you still want to fight these 50 orcs in the stronghold? And they're like, yes. And at this point, they're very confident because the cleric has the lightning wand, so he's basically a mobile plasma tank. So they can't be stopped. They could do anything. So yeah, here's the orc fort. Here we go. Where's that orc fort at? Let's see. I couldn't tell which adventure or which scenes were going to be the most interesting to talk about. All right. So they go to fight these orcs in their fort. I know. I put this map together in 5 minutes using random maps. So just bear with me. Fucking random encounters. So they've got to go fight these orcs. The orcs have some wyverns that they've trained. So they're not just orcs. But they are wrecking these orcs. But the orcs are also wrecking them because 5e action economy. And here's the problem. Imrith is starting to get fed up with these guys, because now they know about the Eye of the Allfather. And now they're going to be, causing problems. Because again, she could scry on them anytime she wants because of the wand. So Marcus is using the wand left and right during this fight, because you got to AoE down all these orcs, and every time he calls out "Witness me," it's alerting Imrith where they are and what they're doing. So Imrith calls in a favor from a black dragon in the swamp and says, go take care of these people, and your favor to me is removed. So a freaking black dragon shows up and starts wrecking the party. Well, they're like, what are we gonna do? There's a black dragon. We just got done fighting 50 orcs. This created a perfect opportunity to bring in Grandpa Cloud Giant. Right? So Grandpa Cloud Giant was not going to be there from the very beginning, because I felt like Grandpa Cloud Giant was too cool to just throw in there at the very beginning. So they don't run into Grandpa Cloud Giant until later. Now, the default Grandpa Cloud Giant map is alright. I think I made like a custom one, but I can't find it. But essentially, Grandpa Cloud Giant shows up, and he sends his little Care Bear cloud cars down, and they pick up the party, and the party goes back, and then Grandpa Cloud Giant chases away the black dragon, and then they use this cloud castle to float the rest of the way to the Eye of the Allfather. Now, my advice is use Grandpa Cloud Giant in the same manner that I did. If your campaign gets way too far off track, if they're completely lost, if they've managed to go so far off the map that they will never get this campaign back on track, if the train is derailed, there's no more choo-choo train, they've tanked the whole campaign, have this fucking cloud castle show up and be like, get in, guys, we're gonna go back to the actual campaign. If you guys are having a lot of fun, I guess don't. But if you want to actually play Storm King's Thunder, I would recommend using Cloud Giant as the magical band-aid to get your players back into the campaign. Because it's a freaking flying cloud castle. You can take them anywhere they need to go. Now, stat-wise, they could just kill this dude and take his castle. So if you got a group of murder hobos and you send this cloud giant to rescue them, get ready, because they're going to kill him and they're going to take his castle. They're going to have a cool cloud castle. Honestly, as long as they're playing the campaign at that point, I wouldn't even have cared. I was like, maybe they're going to kill this guy. That's okay. So they finally ride in this cloud car, or cloud castle, to the location they needed to get to, the Eye of the Allfather. Thank freaking God, right? We're finally back on the narrative. We're on the campaign. So here's where it starts to get even crazier. The Eye of the Allfather is a giant dungeon, the first of several giant dungeons. I was not mentally prepared for a giant dungeon, and I want to put it out there and say that I don't think the writers were prepared either. I'm just going to put it out there. So let me restore Eye of the Allfather so we can take a look at it. Let's see. This is definitely something that if I could do it again, I would try to do it better, because goddamn was it a disaster. All right, so what is a giant? A giant is giant, right? So what about a giant's dungeon? It would be pretty big, right? Oh yeah, it's pretty damn big. It's pretty damn big. So you've got this dungeon where everything is giant sized. So these squares here, these aren't real squares. Each of these squares is 20 feet. That's how big the squares are. Yeah, it's a big dungeon. So they get there and they're going down this giant hallway, and like the first encounter is a bunch of Uthgardt barbarians who have come here for reasons. I don't know. It's pretty weak. And they're here, and the party can go to fight them. But here's the problem, right? This is 5th edition. So these guys have no real ranged attacks at all, these poor barbarians. And the heroes are coming in here. The dungeon's dark. These guys have a light source because they're humans. So they're lit up. They're the only light in the darkness, okay? The party literally had, I don't know, what is it, like 500 feet? 300 feet? Something like that they had to cross to engage with these people. We ended up spending like 5 combat rounds running towards each other. It was the dumbest thing I've ever done as a DM. Well, okay, it's one of the dumbest things I've ever done as a DM, was actually play that out. It took a forever. And then what was the point? They were going to kill these Uthgarts no matter what. So why did we even mess around? So finally I was like, look, it's obvious you guys aren't going to gun them down at range. I'm just going to move them right next to you. And then we could just sort of start the fight as if you were closer together, because this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. So we did that, and there was a cool fight, and there was a MVP move where somebody basically suplexed a dude onto this trap, and then the ceiling came down and crushed him. Yeah, the thing is, right, is like the Uthgarts are so busy trying to open this door that they don't think anyone else is going to come here, because this is like a secret dungeon. I honestly couldn't understand for the life of me, like, most of the design of this dungeon. It was just like, it's big. That was their thing. So you climb up here. There's controls that turn these traps on and off. There's portcullises here that you could go through if you melt away the ice. The door's covered in ice. You can melt that away. Then you get into this room, and this room was pretty dope. This is where there's all the gods of the giants and the main god of the giants. And you've got DM NPC Harshnag with him, and he fills them in on the giant history and the giant religion, and now they actually understand a bit more about what the hell is going on, and it's starting to kind of come together and get pretty cool. So then they go down here, and there are some Remoras, which are a phenomenal monster in 5th edition, and they have a crazy fight against them where they have to climb up on these stone tables to like try to get away from them to mess up their tremor sense and all that. Is gets eaten and dies. They bring her back later. It's a whole thing. You might notice that Imrith is here. I'll explain that in a second. Then there's the puzzle lock that they have to get through. And as far as written adventure puzzle locks go, I thought it was a pretty good one. It was well done. So they didn't trigger any of the traps, and they solved the puzzle. They end up in here, and then there was a very cool sequence where they could ask the Oracle 6 questions. Now, the Oracle as written is a real turd. They're like, you're not giants, prove yourselves, or I'm not going to answer any of your questions, even though you traveled all the way here, you got past my traps and my guardians, and you answered my puzzle lock correctly. I still don't believe that you're good giant people, so get out of here. I'm kind of like, we've done enough side quests, all right? Just answer the fucking questions. If you plan on making this the longest campaign you've ever run, this ghostly oracle will send them on a lot of MacGuffin quests. I'm talking about a lot of MacGuffin quests. It takes a lot to convince this thing that you are legit. So you get to the Eye of the Allfather, and then the Wards of the Oracle, and the Wards of the Oracle is like, this part of the adventure was kind of cool because it did actually give you answers for questions that came up during like writing and playtesting, which I thought was really smart to include that list. But basically, they say, yeah, here's a grocery list of giant relics. I want you to go, and I want you to go retrieve them. Now, we've already discussed that low-level travel takes forever, and unless they murder Hobo, a cloud giant, and take away his special castle, it's going to take freaking forever to go get all these things. Now, technically, they only need to get one, I think, maybe 3. I don't remember. And if they have Harshnag with them, Harshnag will be like, oh yeah, I know where all these places are. So that'll speed things up also. But for me, they'd already done a bunch of side quest stuff and a bunch of random encounter stuff and a bunch of character background stuff. I was like, we're finally back on the narrative. We are not going to go chasing down a bunch of MacGuffins. Okay. So I skipped this part. I just skipped it. Each of these has their own single encounter map. It's very Skyrim. I don't know if you played Skyrim. It was, but their giants or dragons are coming back to life, and they have these dragon burial mounds. It's the same idea. These are all giant burial mounds hidden across like the Sword Coast. You go there, and then there's like an encounter, and you have the encounter, and then you get the giant relic, and then you return to the Oracle. I have heard of DMs that made their groups get every single one of these. I have also heard of groups who did what I did. They took all of these locations and they made them places where the Vanadad pieces were going to be located. Smart. So that way I could have used these maps if they had decided to track down the pieces of the Vanadad. I would have already had maps and encounters for tracking down the Vanadad pieces. That seemed like a better play by my account. As it was, they made it to the Oracle with basically the Dritz Duerden of giants, Harshnag. I feel like the Oracle, if it knows what's going on, it would be like, yeah, I'm just going to answer your questions. So, the Oracle answers their questions. There was a Cloud Giant ghost there. The Cloud Giant ghost was killed by his father when he and his father traveled here to ask it questions. And the Cloud Giant ghost was definitely a big red herring. I'm sure someone's written an adventure for this crap, but basically even the adventure is like, yeah, this guy wants revenge on his father so his ghost can rest, but we don't have any other information to get you other than his dad's mean. Yeah, so if your party latches onto this ghost and they're like, we want to help you, bro, you basically better get ready. You better come up with a cloud giant and a castle for the cloud giant to live in so that they could get revenge. Now, if my party had been interested in that, I would have just had the dude's father be shacking up with the actual bad guy cloud giant that's from the adventure. Because that would have tied two different, like one completely pointless side quest with the actual plot of the adventure. And then they could have killed that dude and avenged him, but then they would have actually had to go up against 2 cloud giants, so that would have been kind of hype also. So that's how I was going to handle this ghost guy who had no actual content provided, even though he gave out a quest for it. It's kind of annoying. There's a lot of stuff like that in this adventure. It's like, it's a lot of like, this would be cool if, but then they don't actually give you anything for it. Like, all of these different locations that they list here in the table of contents, they all have like cool ideas for what could happen, but they don't actually give you anything to run those ideas with. They're just like, hey, Griffin Tribe, Uthgard Barbarians are here. Also, Hill Giants, Orcs, and other stuff. Okay, cool. Alright, so you better be ready to make up some adventures, I guess. Same thing. Like, everywhere you go through, there's all these great ideas for side quests, but there's no actual meat for the side quest. It's like you've purchased the skeleton of a campaign, and it's your job to actually put the meat back on the skeleton. It's kind of weird like that. Like, I'm running Honestly the Dragon Lords, and there are some things like that, but Honestly the Dragon Lords is like 460 pages, and it's all the adventure. Whereas this adventure was not that beefy or bulky. It certainly relies a lot on you going and filling in the details, which, you know, is a fun challenge as a DM, but it made this a much more challenging campaign to run than I thought it would be, because so much of it was just, yeah, this would be cool. Like, maybe this happens. And every once in a while they have like a suggested encounter. And honestly, this could have been the whole campaign, is just suggested encounter. Because, like I said at the very beginning, there was very few things that you had to do in this campaign. Everything else was just optional fluff. It was a whole bunch of optional fluff. Anyways. So, the Oracle answers their questions. They ask some good questions, and they finally find out about Imrith. So, Imrith is, of course, watching with great interest, because these adventurers have definitely roused her interest. So, they come out, and per the freaking adventure, the final boss is waiting for them, and she's going to kill them all. I thought that was a bold move by the writers. Because she's way too strong, even as written, and then the Imrith that I used was even stronger than that. So I was like, hopefully this isn't the end of the campaign. So they have this fight, and the party gets smart, and they trigger all the traps for the dungeon, because the traps are indiscriminate. So now there's traps that are going after Imrith, and there's traps that are going after them in equal measure. Now the writers, they have DM NPC, who you've made them fall in love with, Harshnag. He is going to sacrifice himself so that the party can escape. Okay, that's cool, that's cool. So he and Imrith do battle. Mathematically, Harshnag has no chance. And that's it, right? Harshnag's dead. The party flees from Imrith. They run along, run. They get outside into the snow and the storm. But now they're at the top of a mountain. They don't know how they got here because they were dropped off by a cloud car. And this dragon, when she's done killing their dude, is going to come back after them, right? Now, they did think to trigger these traps and drop these giant blocks down here, and that'll slow her down. But Imrith is a sorceress and a wizard. She's going to be able to, like, you know, dimension door past these blocks and get to them. What the hell are they going to do? They're going to die. But the writers thought of that too, and that is when a freaking airship shows up and rescues them. And the airship is not manned with good guys. It is manned with bad guys, which was kind of interesting. So that brings us over to the airship. Let's see. Okay. Oh, yeah. Here's here's the Cloud Castle. This is them eating a pizza while they take some giant lessons or whatever. There's Ias. She's dead again, as usual. There was the big old dragon that was after him. Good stuff, good stuff. All right, that's the wrong airship map. Here we go. Dragon Cult airship. All right, so this lovely map is an Eberron airship by Sizupiku. I thought at this point, I was like, man, the campaign's going to get so cool now because they're going to have an airship. It's going to be amazing. So these guys are dragon cultists that work for Klauth. The reason Klauth looks terrible is because I had to scale his miniature up real big. Klauth is the largest and most powerful red dragon in Forgotten Realms. He is so strong that he has torn the top off a mountain and thrown it at a orc village, killing all the orcs instantly. So he's a tough dude. he is also opposed to Imrith for similar reasons to Claw Matar. He loves his human followers and worshippers. They make him strong, somewhat godly, you might say. He makes a lot of money off of the status quo. Nobody messes with him. Everyone's afraid of him. And then he also doesn't like the fact that Imrith might gain favor from Tiamat as a result of this, and become more powerful and thus a more dangerous rival. This is a guy who is the CEO of evil dragons in Forgotten Realms, and he does not want anything to change. So he also wants to stop Imrith, but he also can't do so directly because then he would look like a traitor, right? He's going against he's trying to help small people and giants against a fellow dragon. That's going to look real bad. It's going to look real bad for him. So he can't directly oppose her. So his followers go to save the characters per his instructions. And then Imrith teleports out, flies after them. She's going to kill them for real. She's already, quote unquote, taking care of Harshnag. But she sees the outfits of these people, knows that they work for Clouth, and is afraid to attack them. And then she flies away. Now, the party witnessed all this, and still they were like, cool, airship. Mathematically, statistically, they could have killed all of these cultists and their adorable kobolds, and they could have taken this airship. And that would have been pretty cool. The problem is, it's not it's not the cultist, 500,000 gold piece airship. It belongs to their boss, Clouth, and Clouth ain't going to take no shit for that. So if they kill all his peeps and they take his stuff, that's a direct attack against Clouth. Now they're dealing with a dragon who's like a CR-47 or something ridiculous like that, and he ain't going to be okay with that. He's going to have to come and make a statement. So the idea here is diplomacy, right? You got to team up with these evil dragon cultists so that you can get access to the airship, so that you can quickly travel across the Sword Coast to get all the things that you need, right? So while the party is doing that, the party rogue is sneaking around the airship, trying to steal things and figure out how they could steal the airship. The party rogue had some of the worst dice rolls of any character I've ever seen. Larionis the rogue was one of the worst dice rolls on any character I'd ever seen ever in my life. So of course I ask him for a check, and he fails it. He didn't critically fail it, because we don't use critically failing on skills. He just rolled that badly. So he was caught sneaking around. They didn't like that. He, I believe, tried to do it a second time and failed a second time. And that was when the cultist landed the airship and just kicked everybody off and flew away. And there went their airship. Now, conveniently enough, they were dropped off where I needed them to be, which was outside of Yartar. So outside of Yartar, now they can go inside and get the goddamn sword. So they go in and they make arrangements to get the sword. The sword was gambled away by the son, who now the guard captain has the sword. You can't just kill the guard captain. He's a cop. You can't kill cops. What are you going to do? Turns out this is a bad dude cop. If you go up against him, he's got crime connections, blah, blah, blah. What are we going to do? So that's when they decide to just go to the city's leader and just say, hey, we were sent by Lord Zymorvan, and we need this sword, and your dude has the sword. This is the guy right here, Brenner. He got taken care of politically. But, yeah. So they talk to her, and then she's like, great, I would love to have this guy removed from his position, and I will give you the sword and all that jazz. I just need one little thing from you. I need you to figure out why all my political allies are being made to disappear. Okay, so that's how we triggered Kraken's Gambit, right? You got to investigate some missing nobles, which kicks off Kraken's Gambit, or sorry, Gamble, and then bam, Now you get to go to this really cool riverboat casino and do an investigation and gamble and all sorts of other cool stuff. Human trafficking, adventure in the sewers. It was actually really, really fun. And I feel kind of bad because it's kind of one of the best parts of the campaign. And it's a $2.99 fan-made adventure that wasn't actually part of the adventure. And I kind of want to say it was one of the stronger parts of the whole campaign. So, yeah. Again, mandatory. Go pick up Kraken's Gamble, make sure that they run it. So one of the things about Kraken's Gamble is, in the adventure, there are poker chips that they use at this casino, and you introduce the poker chips because they go to the casino to check out the missing nobles, and you should give them this handout for, well, you have to make it yourself, but you give them a handout that shows the chip, right? It has a golden goose on it or whatever, because that's going to stick in their brains for later, because the princess has one of those poker chips because it fell out of the pocket of one of the people that killed her mom. And then that's the tie to Yartar for later, so they know exactly where to go when that clue comes up. And then there's this whole amazing moment where you hear the clicking sound of shit making sense. And it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Kraken's gamble. Yeah. So the River Baroness sends him off on this job. It was really fun because I got to reintroduce an NPC from the past, which was really fun. She kind of started as like a guest character, and they went down into the sewers, and they got to go on this really cool riverboat casino, which I don't know where the map is for that. Maybe I retired it. Probably did. But basically, that whole adventure turned out really good. Then they go down into the sewers, and they had to fight an aboleth, and aboleth is a very hard fight. But the way they wrote the adventure for Kraken's Gamble, it ended up being like a really cool fight. Let's see. Yeah. So they went down into the sewers, and they got to fight all kinds of cool stuff, including Kuatoa, which you don't really see too often, which is kind of cool. And then the Kuatoa had these adorable creatures with them called Gulpers, which are adorable. Anyways, and then you got to fight classic. You can't go in a sewer without fighting an Otluk, whatever. Then they went down here, and they had to fight the Aboleth. And there was mechanics in this room where the room would flood, but there was also a drain, so you could like change the water levels, and how you change the water levels changed the fight. It was really cool. Marcus decided to use shape water to really mess things up, and in a moment of inspiration, I was like, it'd be really cool if you basically flushed everybody down the toilet. So he ends up breaking the sewer system, and it all starts collapsing all around them, which adds some like end of a Metroid game, escape from the bad stuff. That's what all these falling rocks are and stuff. So I had it that the Aboleth would obviously have an escape hatch if things went bad, because it's a super smart evil creature. So they go in here, and there's a hole that leads down into the Underdark. They get flushed down the hole of the Underdark like a bunch of rats or turds, and they end up in the Underdark, where they had to fight a bunch of carrion crawlers and a cave giant, because it's, a campaign about giants. And then they finally end up back up on the map. Yeah, it's good stuff. Let's see. Wow, that's a lot of robots. So they end up back on the map, and that's cool. Now they have the sword, because they go back in and they talk to the River Baroness. She gives them Lord Zymorvan's sword. They manage to free Lord Zymorvan's son from prison. And then she's like, you destroyed a big part of my city. I'd prefer I never saw you again. You're banished from Yartar. Please leave. So that was kind of cool. They got kicked out of Yartar. So now they're out of Yartar, and they have the giant slaying sword, and they know they got to kill a giant. So they finally go to Tribor. Then they go back to Phandelver. They use sending spells to make good with the cultists of Clouth. Cultists of Clouth trade them all the information they have about the fire giants in exchange for some mounts. Since they couldn't get an airship, flying mounts were the next best thing. So now they had a bunch of Hellkites. Hellkite is basically a red dragon wyvern. It's more fun than a wyvern. You can't milk it for poison. And it has a fiery breath weapon. So now they have these cool Hellkites. And they have to decide where they want to go and what they want to do. So they ride their Hellkites over to Westbridge to look baller. They pick up all the magical leatherworking stuff that they had working on the whole time, and they have to decide which giant lord are we going to go against. And this took like 2 weeks of like discussion before they finally settled on the hill giants. So, honestly, smart choice. Hill giants were the easiest of all the giants. You only need to get the horn. You don't even have to kill them. The fire giants are pretty damn strong, and it's a very long process to get to them. They had a CR-23 fire elemental that you would have had to fight. Fire giants were strong. Frost giants were actually not that bad because most of the frost giants are traveling around the world looking for the Ring of Winter. So their home base is actually pretty poorly defended. The problem with the frost giants is it's on the other side of the world. So they would have had to go all the way up and over up to here, like, you know, Bryn Shander, like further north than that. They would have to go way up here. And even with flying mounts, that's a lot. That's a lot. Plus the frost giants kind of kicked the crap out of the party when they were low level, and it still hurt all those levels later, so they were not about to travel all the way there just to get their butts kicked. They didn't know anything about the storm giants, or sorry, not the storm giants, the stone giants, or where the stone giants were, so they didn't want to mess with that. And the Cloud Giantess was a contender, and I kind of wish they had gone after the Cloud Giant, because then they would have had a floating castle afterwards, which would have been amazing, and I had an awesome map for it and everything. But they didn't. They went after the Giants instead. That ended up being a really cool arc. There is an optional side quest on the way to the Giants where you find a wayward female giant named Moog. And if you are nice to her, she gives you all the deets on the giants and Chief Guh and all that stuff. So, a word of warning about Chief Guh. As written, she is so fat that she actually can't do anything. I felt like that wasn't as fun as her being a big fat rolling ball of death. So I did make my own Moog stat block where I made like some Katamari Dynasty or whatever, where a bunch of ogres and hill giants were actually rolling her around the battlefield in order to kill everybody. This was a pretty intense and I thought it was pretty fun adventure, because they flew in on their flying dragons and started blowing shit up. They had their NPCs go and sabotage the dam, which flooded the area and kind of collapsed the building. And then they bullshitted their way past the guards and got an audience right here in the throne room with hell amounts of giants and ogres and giant vultures and everything else. And then Guh was just a beefy girl, a very beefy girl. And I gave her all sorts of ridiculously broken abilities. Like she could roll over you and you would get stuck in her fat rolls. Yeah, it was kind of crazy. All that being said, as written, she literally just sits here, and then you just, you kill her, or you dive into her fat rolls, and you retrieve the conch horn. There was a lot to do in this dungeon. This was another giant-sized dungeon, so it was very awkward with, like, how big it is versus how small you are, kind of thing. I thought it was really fun. There were a lot of different ways that they could have handled this dungeon. I don't think there were any wrong ways to handle this dungeon. And ultimately, it was 2 sessions long and very, very exciting. I'm glad they picked this one because it ended up being a lot of fun. And then I don't regret at all making Chief Guh a rolling ball of death and destruction, because I think that was pretty memorable compared to her just sitting in a wagon the whole time doing nothing. So they got the conch horn, but rather than blow it right away, they did decide to regroup, rest, get the refugees that they had saved from the hill giants back to civilization, all that kind of stuff. So they left that behind, and they headed down to, and you can see we're traveling, you know, a pretty good ways around the map, but it's still not nearly covering the whole Sword Coast. This adventure covers everything you see on this map. That's the crazy part. They could go anywhere, basically. Alright, so then they went like this, and then they went like this, and then they went here, and then they traveled all the way down to Golden Fields. So once they had gotten down to Golden Fields, they dropped off the NPCs, they rested up, they still didn't want to blow the horn yet, they wanted to get some more magic items built and made, because they had no idea what was waiting for them when they blew the horn. So, they flew all the way back to Wave Echo Cave to pick up magic items, and then they decided to do a little side questing. So they flew all the way up to the Subran Hills and did another one of these side quests from Storm King's Barrows, which involved some Ettins. And then they flew up here and did the rest of the quests that involved Storm King's Thunder Barrows Ettins. So at this point, they went over to Rivermoot, they finished up, and then finally they went back to Silvery Moon, which had kind of become their unofficial like home base rather than Phandalin. Now from Silvery Moon, they finally blew the conch. They brought Ias back to life, and they blew the conch, and they ended up, I don't know, somewhere out here, under the water. This is where the Storm Giants lived. So this was really cool. The Storm Giants obviously are too strong. Every single one's like CR 16 or something ridiculous like that. That's like the basic bitch guards. The maps were very cool for their, you know, palace or whatever, and the plot line was pretty cool because again, it's like very King Lear. Like the king is gone or in a mood. The daughters are trying their best to take over. I don't know. I really enjoyed the Maelstrom. I also thought it was cute that they statted it out in the adventure like it was going to be a dungeon, like the party was actually going to go and kill all of the Storm Giants that lived here. Yeah. So they teleport in. They are immediately accosted as, you know, for not being giants. And the sisters, these two sweeties over here, they basically tried to detain the characters. And the compromise was you guys can meet with our little sister who's in charge, but you have to wait until tomorrow. You know, pretty classic stuff. Now the party realizes, oh yeah, they're going to kill us. Like they know that. So it gets more complicated because it's not just the sisters, but there is a representative from every giant group here. So there's a cloud giant, a stone giant, a fire giant, and a frost giant, in addition to the two storm giants that want to kill you. So I'm like, well, this is crazy. And I mean, for me to say that something's crazy, I feel like it's pretty crazy. So like that night, while they're staying in the guest quarters, the two sisters send the four giants, some storm giant guards, and themselves down here to ambush and kill the party, if you want to talk about overkill. Now I'm like, well, they're screwed, right? But the writers actually built a skill challenge into the combat encounter for every single giant. So if the party did certain things or made certain checks or roleplayed a certain way, they could convince the giant representatives to not listen to the sisters and not fight them, which was pretty cool. And the party did, fortunately, pick up on the fact that they weren't going to win this fight and they needed to come up with a better alternative, and they were able to survive the encounter. Now, they did have Harshnag with them, so that helped, but honestly, Harshnag one guy against all this stuff. So, mid-battle, the Princess Sarissa comes down. There's, again, just so much happened here. It was crazy. Let's see. Where's Princess Sarissa? There she is. So she comes down, and she wants to know what the hell's going on here, and they're like, your sisters are trying to kill us, we're here to save you, blah, 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 blah. So it's starting to get very interesting, right? Like we're finally in the meat of the adventure. Because like I said, there's really only like 10 things that you have to do for this whole adventure, and this is one of those things. So the parts of the adventure that actually are the adventure, I felt are really fun and cool. It's just they pad it with so much, you know, road tripping, basically. So you go back up to the throne room and you hash it out. But that is where Mythir is. Now, this character is named Mythir, and obviously, just like Lord Voldemort, Tom Riddle kind of deal. Spoiler there, I guess. I just took Imrith's name and I rearranged it. I am not even lying to you that in the written adventure, Imrith's secret name, while she's disguised as a storm giant, screwing over the storm giants, is Imrith. Yeah. That's the strength of writing that we're dealing with. She did not even have a fake name. She just was like, I'm Imrith. Didn't even try to hide it. Yeah. So the advice that I got online was obviously to use a different name, and so I threw her name into an anagram program on the internet, and it spit out a bunch of stuff, and I saw Mythir, and I was like, that sounds like a giant name. That'll be cool. So, Mythir is there. She's doing the whole like Jafar thing from Aladdin, where she's like whispering to the princess that these people are troublemakers and they're no good, and you can't trust small folk because small folk killed your mother, and blah 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 blah. So finally, the party manages to out diplomacy Mythir, which is pretty impressive. And then the princess is like, oh, wow, okay. And the storm giants don't have a lot of magic, and they don't have a lot of clerical magic. So when Marcus says that he could speak with the dead queen, the princess is actually into it. So they go to the queen's crypt, and I'm expecting any second for somebody to realize that Mythir is Imrith and have a throwdown, right? So they go over to this crypt, and they bring back like the ghost of Queen Neri with Speak with Dead, and they try to get questions about who killed her, and she says like something about a golden bird or a killer bird, that kind of thing. That jogs the memory of the princess to be like, oh, I found this. They found this when they found my mother's dead body. I didn't know what to do with it. And she hands them the poker chip. And then, because they ran Kraken's Gambit, you heard this audible click as everybody was like, son of a bitch. Like, we got to go back to Yartar and figure out what happened. So, yeah, it was a good moment. There was another click that happened here later. But they travel back to Yartar. They make a deal with the Baroness because they want to take out the guy that owns the casino because he's got... these poker chips, and that implicates him in the death of this foreign noble, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, that's great. He's my political rival. I want to take him out. Welcome back to Yartar. They go in. They go to fight this guy. This guy looks at everybody. He sees how strong they are. He sees that he's only got like a noble stat block with some warlock powers. And he's like, I surrender. So then he dishes on what his organization's been up to, where the Kraken Society has been hired by Imrith to basically keep the king in a perpetual like magical coma that he can't be found, and he can't be brought back to life, right? So he's in a kind of in between life and death sort of thing. He's in this weird magic coma floating around in a boat in the middle of the ocean. Now, as he's telling them all this and spilling the beans, his patron, Slarkrithel, the strongest Kraken in the Sword Coast, just psychically just kills him all the way from like 3,000 miles away. Just kills him. So now they know that a Kraken has the king, and he's on a magic boat, and they gotta save him. So they tell the River Baroness about it, and then the River Baroness is like, don't worry, I know a guy that owes me a favor. Crazy pirate captain will take you there. So then the party returns to the princess, and they go to tell her, like, yeah, girl, we know what's going on. The Kraken Slarkrithel has your father. Since he's a big Kraken, maybe you guys could, save him because you're a bunch of storm giants. The storm giants refuse to act against Slarkrithel. This was a very hard thing to sell as the DM. This is their freaking king. Why would they refuse to try to rescue their king from the Kraken? Basically, I used that as a way to show the party how strong the Kraken was, that the Storm Giants were afraid of the Kraken. They were afraid to go into the Kraken's territory. That's how strong the Kraken was. I've heard about groups that got TPK'd trying to fight this Kraken. I did not want my group to be one of those, so I wanted to make sure that they knew, don't fight this freaking Kraken. The party was still not totally convinced. So they were like, okay, we're gonna fight this Kraken, I guess. I don't know. We're not gonna fight the Kraken, we're gonna save the king. Now, the Storm Giants offered to cause diversions at the borders of the Kraken's territory, but they refused to move against the Kraken because they didn't want to deal with the repercussions of failing to save the king, or simply angering the Kraken and having to deal with his wrath afterwards. So, in that way, they kind of turned to the party and were like, the Kraken knows our people. If we go into his territory, he'll know why we're there. You guys are small folk. You could ride there in a boat, say that your boat got lost, whatever, and then save the king and get out of there. It was a hard sell, and I'm thankful that my players were on board for it because they were like, in for a penny, in for a pound, baby. We're going to save the king. So then they go and they're getting ready to leave, and then the druid Gyoza says, hold on a second, because Mathir is still giving them guff and trying to dissuade them and telling everyone that this is foolish and the Kraken will kill everyone. And then he's like, how do you spell Mathir's name? And then he like checks his notes and he's like, he like had a freak out. He's like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. And then it was one of the best moments as a DM was to hear him sort of get that Mathir was Imrith because the anagram and because of how shitty she is, and she's got a dragon bone headdress and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was really good. So then they had a throwdown with Mathir. So Mathir is a high-level spellcaster. I'm using the improved version of Imrith provided by Sly Flourish. I'll post that into chat real quick. And basically, there was a throwdown. They fought her. She was very powerful. She actually completely shut down an entire room full of giants and adventurers, took the scepter that controls their ancient ancestral throne, and got the hell out of there. So now the party's super pissed, and they're like, Kraken, we don't care about no Kraken. We're going to get the king back no matter what. So that actually ended up working out pretty good. So they run some errands. They go to fight the Kraken. All right. Now, I had to modify the ship that came with the adventure because it was not good enough. But essentially, they went to fight... they went to save the king. Now, because of how difficult the Kraken was, I wanted them to be able to get in and get out pretty easily. So I ran all of the stuff here as is. The only difference is I added a Canoloth, because when you're a bad guy in 5th edition and you want to protect something, you hire a Canoloth because they're the best. So other than the Canoloth, everything else was vanilla as is, and they just steamrolled this shit. They were just wrecking it. There was an incredible sequence where Marcus yet again used his Shape Water spell to wreak havoc on Dungeons and Dragons, and he actually caused the ship to fall like 500 feet into the ocean. Like he hollowed out the ocean underneath the ship, and without the buoyancy of the water, the ship fell through and then crashed down. And then he had to maintain his concentration, or 500 feet of ocean was going to come crashing down and killing everyone. It was pretty tense and pretty awesome. They managed to save the king by blasting these magical chains off of him. While they were doing that, that's when Slarkrithel finally shows up. So, Slarkrithel is very big. It basically says if 2 combat rounds go by, he just kills everybody. I mean, that's basically how strong he is. Whatever you do, don't let your players try to fight this guy. Like, just please don't. Unless you hate your group and you don't want to finish up, I guess, then go for it. Here you can see this illustration of the cube of water that they made and the arrow indicating that you're going to fall through the buoyancy, fall to the bottom of the ocean. So they go through to get the king, then they use the horn yet again, and they teleport with the king back to the place, and then the ocean comes crashing down around the Kraken. The Kraken doesn't get everybody, and that was the end of that. But damn, this was probably the best session of the whole campaign. Was saving the king from the Kraken. Was by far the best session of the whole campaign. So after that, how do you top that, right? So there's a session after that that's kind of a cooldown session. They go back to Maelstrom. The king like honors them. He gives them a bunch of dope magical items, some money, all that. He's like, thank you. And then he goes to bed and he has a dream where Annam the Allfather visits him and says, I have returned. The ordning is real. I want a champion to show me the growth of the giant people. And this is all wrapped up in the lore of like giants in the Forgotten Realms. I definitely recommend Googling like, what they don't tell you about giants on YouTube. There's a great video that kind of explains like Forgotten Realms giants and their lore. And it's very useful for running this adventure to know what the hell Forgotten Realms giants are about and what they're motivated about, because that's what this whole adventure is what's motivating giants. So he has a dream that he could win the ordning by getting revenge against Imrith, and he basically says, I'm gonna go fight Imrith and I'd like you to come with me. Would you like to come help me fight Imrith? And I'm not even gonna lie to you, the adventure straight up says the players don't have to go fight Imrith. It's crazy. Like the king actually says, like, yeah, dude, I'm gonna go fight Imrith. Are you down for it? And the party could be like, nah, we're good. And if they're like, nah, we're good, that's the end of the campaign. Like, saving the king is the end of the campaign. Technically, fighting Imrith is post-campaign content, because all you had to do was save the king, and that was the end of the campaign. Oh, yeah. He has foresight on him, all that stuff. Like, going back to the Kraken thing. The Kraken there was no chance. So the king is like, yeah, dude, let's do this thing. Let's go fight her. And the party's like, of course we're going to fight her, even though we're in no way qualified to do so. And I was like, man, this adventure's pretty ambitious, because they're only level 10. How are they going to do this, even with some giants helping them? Well, they thought of that too. They have potions of giant size, legendary artifacts that the characters drink and they become giants for 24 hours, which is absolutely bananas. I have heard a lot of DMs say that this was bullshit and a cop-out and lame and cheat codes and everything else. I'm here to tell you, I've been running D&D for like 26 years. And I have never had an adventure where the players had a chance to become giants for the final dungeon and the final fight. I was not going to deprive them of the opportunity to be giants. Like, no way. So, like, yes, I ran this exactly as written. They got this potion of giant size. Furthermore, the king had this trump card, the Claw of the Worm rune. I did have to change this item because it was kind of crappy as written, so I made it like a one-use item that basically hoses a dragon. Like, it creates an arena that the dragon can't escape from, and it has to face you in that arena. Otherwise, 20th level wizard sees all these people come to kill her, she's going to just teleport away. And that's not fun. So they go to fight Imrith. I had to make special maps for it, even though the maps that came with the adventure were adequate. I made my own maps for it, because that's just how I do. So the first part of the fight against Imrith takes place in this desert coliseum. I had a bunch of giants show up because I wanted them to realize that the giants were that afraid of the Kraken that they did not want to move against them, but they would totally come to the middle of the desert and kick the shit out of this dragon. And that's what they did. So Imrith put up a good fight, but she was kind of overwhelmed by the amount of, stuff she had to deal with. So they got her down to, I think, like 20 health or something. And then she was able to teleport back to her lair. Then the party as giants got to do a giant dungeon, but this time I made the giant dungeon So it was really cool. So they came down here and they cleared out this giant dungeon, and then they went in as giants and had this fight against Imrith. And it was really funny because like your speed doesn't get any better as a giant. So even though you're really big, you could still only move 30 feet. And it was very hard for everybody to kind of wrap their heads around being like big and slow. It was an awesome fight. It was one of the better fights I've ever run. I'd put this fight up there with Tiamat. It was a really good fight. And I owe all of that to Sly Flourish's version of Imrith that added some unique abilities from her second edition stat block and really brought a lot of her lore into the character and just made her absolute beast. It made a creature that was able to fight 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 giant heroes, basically, and hold her own. By the end of the fight, everyone was running on fumes. Nobody had, like, spell slots were almost all, I think, were all used up. Hit points were all used up. They were running on good berries and potions. It was crazy. Very good fight. Very cool. And then with the defeat of Imrith, that brought us to the end of the campaign. There was more to do. I had these dope, like, horde golems if they had decided to stick around and, like, finish adventuring. There was, like, mummy tombs they could have gone in and stuff. But the goal was achieved. And at that point, you know, it is what it is. Now, something I did with this game that I hadn't done before was I wrote a bunch of prologues, and I read them out to the group, and man, ending a campaign with some good prologues, wow, that was some powerful stuff. And I really owe Fire Emblem Three Houses for that, because I had just beaten that game, and they had prologues for every character that survived to the end of the game. And they were so well written and so heartfelt, and you had spent, 70 hours hanging out with these characters with all the cutscenes and everything, so you really kind of cared about the characters. And so hearing these prologues, it meant a lot to me as the player who had invested all his time and energy. And I was like, why have I never not pre-written those before? Like for Red-Handed Doom Scales of War, we had prologues. No, not prologues, sorry, epilogues. But, like, I kind of just bullshitted them, I was just like, and then this happens, yeah. But for Storm King's Thunder, I actually went and, wrote them ahead of time. I had a whole prep session where I just wrote epilogues, and I wrote them for all of the characters, and all of their favorite NPCs, and even, some silly NPCs. They all eventually kind of loved Moog, so I let them know what happened with Moog. And they really liked Cricket's mom, so I let them know how it went with Cricket's mom. And they hated Lord Zymorvan, because he was, racist uncle. So I made sure to include him having a massive heart attack at a Human Pride rally. And it was basically this beautiful and fun way to kind of close up a very long investment of, time and emotion and energy. I really, really recommend anybody that's getting ready to end their campaign to try hard and write some really thoughtful epilogues for the campaign. Let people know, I paid attention to your character. This is what I think would probably happen. And I even told my players before I read them that this is what I thought they might do post-campaign. But if it was off the mark or whatever, to please correct me. And I got them all right. So it was really, really fun. So that kind of brought the campaign to a close. Now, you see, again, this table of contents, this is a big-ass adventure, considering there's only 10 things you're supposed to do. It's a pretty big adventure. So much of this content is optional. Now, I have heard about groups that made their party fight every single tribe of giants. They went down the list. They had to get all the MacGuffins for the Oracle. Then they had to fight all the hill giants, all the stone giants, all the frost giants, all the fire giants, all the cloud giants, and then finally go and help the storm giants. And honestly, I was afraid that I would burn out or my group would burn out doing that many giant tribe dungeons over and over and over again. I just didn't think that it was sustainable. Now I've heard groups that have done it. One thing that I think is kind of cool is because there's all this optional content you didn't get to, it does set you up for some post-game content. And that's kind of what I'm toying with now, is now that the campaign's over, I kind of want to go back to those 4 giant tribes that didn't get visited, and I want to turn them into their own adventure series, basically. So, what happened to the frost giants after the ordning ended? What happened to the fire giants after the ordning ended? What happened to that cloud giant lady that was causing trouble? And what happened to the Dodkong, who is this basically stone giant lich, and what he was getting up to? And I like it because I'm going to invite back the players who played through, but if some of them don't want to make it, I'll open up those slots to people that just want to make like an 11th level character and go kick the shit out of some frost giants, and so on and so forth. And they're not going to be run back to back, so there'll probably be like 3 weeks of this adventure, maybe a break, and then we'll run this adventure, another break, and then we'll run this adventure, another break, and this adventure, another break. And that kind of allows me to experience as the DM like the rest of the content, and also allows the players to experience the rest of the content, but also experience their characters at a stronger, higher level of play, and also in a world that they created, right? Because at the conclusion of my Storm King's Thunder, King Hecaton, because of the actions of the Sword Saints, of the player characters, he wants to finish his wife's work. He wants to unite the Storm Giants and the people of the Sword Coast in like friendship and peace and understanding. He wants to get the evil giants to leave the small folk alone. Like the dynamics of the whole like Sword Coast have been changed forever by my players' actions, and it would be awesome to run games in their Forgotten Realms, in the Forgotten Realms that they created. So that's kind of where the excitement of running that post-game content comes, for me, at least. Now, one thing I want to address before the end. You will read this adventure, and you will wonder, why? Why are these people doing this at all? Like, why is anybody motivated to do anything? And fortunately, there's this really great Discord group for Storm King's Thunder DMs, and I was fortunate enough to find them before the end, and they kind of helped me get the narrative back on track. But there is a Reddit thread that is basically called Problems with Storm King's Thunder and How to Fix Them. So let me post that into chat. And let's see. Basically, this guy goes through, or girl, I don't know, and they address every single issue with the campaign and provide thoughtful and intelligent ways to explain them. And that inspired me to go even further and kind of explain what my version of the story was about, right? So I decided that Annam, because I went and researched the history of giants in Forgotten Realms, and it's basically just the Jesus Christ story all over again. Annam sends down his half-god son to show the giants that they need to share the world with the other races and not be assholes, and they basically kill his Jesus son. And then Annam's like, I hate you guys, I'm leaving. And he literally leaves the crystal sphere. He just goes somewhere else. And without Annam to control the other giant gods, they encourage their particular giants to embrace the stereotypes of their particular tribes, and they all get worse instead of better. But hearing about Tiamat, one of his eternal foes, being defeated in Toril, his attention was drawn back to him, because this adventure takes place chronologically after the Tiamat adventure, Horde of the Dragon Queen, or whatever it is. So he wants to check on his wayward children. He drew by to take a look, and as he got close to the crystal sphere, the ordning started, which is basically the second coming, right? It's just Jesus' story all over again. Imrith, she's super pissed because she sunk a lot of money and effort into bringing Tiamat into Forgotten Realms, and that whole plotline got ruined. And she's really embarrassed for dragons, and she's really mad. And she's also just a really mean and spiteful and hateful person. And it's crazy, but like Imrith's major motivation is just that she's petty. She's just super petty. She's mad about the Tiamat plot failing, and she wants to just stick it to the small folk and stick it to the giants. So she takes her two least favorite people, the giants and the small folk, and she hatches a scheme to take advantage of this ordning that she was made aware of because she's super smart. She's always divining stuff and whatnot. Maybe Tiamat tipped her off to it. I don't know. But basically, she hijacks this divine event and weaponizes it to cause the small folk and the giants to start fighting each other. Because the humans and the other small folk will defend themselves if attacked. And the giants are now motivated to be shittier to people than they normally are because they're trying to impress God with the ordning. And honestly, if you look at like real, I'm not trying to get too political here, but if you look at real life and you look at all the different branches of Christianity, and then you look at the original message of, Jesus or whoever, right? They've kind of gone a little off track, right? That's what's happened with the giants. Like the giants all think they know what Annam wants. So the hill giants think he wants them to be fat. The frost giants think that he wants them to bring in eternal winter. The fire giants think that he wants them to destroy everything with a powerful weapon that they created themselves. And the stone giants actually don't care. Their plotline was kind of hype. They're just going to be like, we're going to just be the most powerful and bring about eternal darkness so that we can like be above the world. It was a whole thing. Yeah. So once those people start their crazy machinations, she can almost just sort of sit back and watch it unfold. The problem is the storm giants, the strongest of all the giants in the Forgotten Realms, are good. So she has to somehow deal with that shit. So that's where she brings in her bro Slarkrithel. Now Slarkrithel's pretty easy to motivate. He hates the Storm Giants. They're like his super good neighbors. They're like Ned Flanders, They're like goody-goodies that live right next door to him, and they're always doing good deeds, and they're a pain in the ass. They're always getting in his way. So he's like, yeah, I'll totally help you screw over my neighbors. I hate those guys. You'll just owe me a favor later, baby. That kind of thing. So yeah, that's how Slarkrithel gets involved. It's not that complicated. So, now she goes and she has the queen assassinated, which triggers the Storm King to go bananas. The Storm King tries to get revenge for his dead wife. He gets jumped by Slarkrithel and his minions. He gets locked up. Now they don't have anyone to guide them, but don't worry, Mathir will help you, because Imrith basically set herself up months in advance as like a court advisor, and with the king and the queen dead and missing, she basically slides in evil Count Vizier, Jafar style, and starts whispering poison into the ears of the three daughters. Now, the one daughter is pure and good and great and destined to be the future leader of the people, so she poisons the two other sisters against her, and that brings the whole family down. They don't have any leadership. They're a fucking mess. Now the other giants can do whatever they want, which is all evil, bad, selfish stuff, because the boss giants are busy tearing themselves apart with a crazy, like, Spanish, drama, soap opera type situation where, like, mother's dead and father's missing and the three sisters are competing for the throne, but the one sister just wants everyone to get along and she doesn't want burden of leadership. And meanwhile, Imrith is just whispering poison into her ear constantly. And Imrith, who can get around because 20th level wizard, she's going around to all her contacts and just continuing to stir those pots. And she's just watching as all of her planning and all her manipulations cause the people she hates the most, giants and small folk, to start destroying themselves. It's beautiful, but it's also like kind of petty. Right? Like, you're an adventurer and you're like, wait a minute, all this is happening because this dragon was mad? She's having a tantrum, basically? she's just being mean? Yes. That's it. Imrith is like the ultimate Karen. Like she got bad service on that Tiamat adventure, and she wants to see the manager. Like that's what's happening here. It's that simple. So I also wanted to make sure, and I already talked about this, that the reason all this kind of comes to a head is that Annam wants desperately for the giants to live in peace with the other races. He's going to give them one more chance. He sees Hecaton as his only option, sends the dream to Hecaton. Hecaton has to go improve himself by making right what was done by Imrith. And by doing that alongside the small folk, that creates this beautiful situation where they can now create a new Sword Coast where the giants all live in peace. And then Annam, on top of everything else, he brings back to life the queen of the giants as a reward to Hecaton so that he and his wife and his daughter can lead their people into a brighter future. It was so good. I would recommend this campaign. I would. I will tell you right now, it is a lot of work, and it could be a lot of work if you are not willing to just pick and choose what happens. Like, you need to set a schedule for this campaign. You need to set hard limits for this campaign. You need to run this campaign on milestone, and you need to constantly redirect people back onto those milestones, or it could go on for the rest of your life. If you want a Sword Coast sandbox campaign that goes on for a really long time, this could be the adventure for you, because as you've seen, there is a lot of shit to do, and this doesn't even count all of the amazing supplements that are available. Like, look at this. For $13, you could go and get all of these side quests, in addition to the other thing of side quests that I showed you right here. I mean, a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff you could do. So this campaign could be short and sweet. You start at level 5 or 6. You focus on the main points. Why are the giants attacking? How do we stop them? Eye of the Allfather, Oracle. Get a horn. Blow the horn. Find out about the thing. Go get the king. Kill Imrith. Bam. That's it. That's the whole campaign. Everything else is just fluff that you just add on. So it could be a very short campaign, or it could be one of the longest campaigns you've ever run if you want to try to run all of the content. And there is a lot of good support out there for it. And even though there's a lot of stuff about it that's very weak, there are great communities and great writers out there who've worked very hard to add more content to it. And you really just got to kind of pick and choose what is best for your telling of the story. And I think you'll have a great time. And last thing, as far as Roll20 modules go, I would say that Storm King's Thunder is the best Roll20 D&D module that they ever made. It has the best maps, it has the most attention to detail, it has the least amount of mistakes and weird stuff. It's actually very affordable now too, because it's one of the earliest ones. I don't know why they seem to get worse with each release, but I can definitely tell you that I am glad I spent the money on it, for sure. There are a lot of maps here that I would not have wanted to dynamically light or recreate myself. So it was a good purchase. All right. And that is my post-mortem. If what went right, what went wrong, real quick, I guess, because we're at 2 hours. I don't know. I don't know if anything particularly went wrong. I think it was hard to keep them motivated to go after the giants, because the giants were very scary at low levels. They're very scary. So I think if I did it again, I would cherry pick the side quests and adventures a little bit better, to make sure that they all kind of had sort of a giant theme and they were all kind of brought back into that fold. But maybe, I don't know. Like, the nature of the campaign is very sandbox, so I don't know if I'd want to take away from that. I think the only thing I would do if I had to do it again is I would just make sure that they ended up in Yartar, so that when they get that clue dropped later on, there's that click moment. Very happy with the Imrith stat block from Sly Flourish. I'm very happy with the fake name I made up for, Mathir. I think that was really, really well done. Yeah, I don't know. I liked it. I guess if I ran it again, I'd run it with only 5 players instead of 6, because I'm kind of over running 6-player groups. I feel like 6 players is too many players. I feel like it creates too much indecision, and it also slows down combat, and it also takes away some spotlight time from players who might want some spotlight time. I'd probably run it with 5 players in a 4-hour block instead of 6 players in a 3-hour block, because I think a 4-hour block is the optimal amount of time to play D&D, and 5 people is the optimal amount to play with players. So I guess, like, story-wise, the repairs that I made and the repairs that were suggested to me by the community were so good that it took a campaign that could have felt a little stale and fell a little flat, and I think it made it into a good campaign. And I am excited to return to this adventure in the form of some post-campaign adventures. So, yeah, overall it was good stuff. It was good stuff. Yeah. So, anyways, I promised myself I was going to do this in 2 hours or less, so I am done for now. If you do have any questions for me, you can hit me up on any of my social medias or Discord, and I'd be happy to answer them about the campaign. The VOD for this is going to go up like Sunday afternoon, so if you think of questions and you just want to post them on the VOD when it goes up on YouTube, that works too. But yeah, I enjoyed this campaign tremendously, and I would recommend it to other people as long as they know what they're getting into. This is a lot more work than it seems, this campaign. So, all right, enjoy your weekend, everybody.